The marketplace buzzed with activity as traders from across the galaxy hawked their wares. Colorful stalls lined the curved pathways of Station Omega-7, each vendor calling out prices in a dozen different languages. The air recyclers worked overtime, mixing the scents of exotic spices, fuel cells, and the metallic tang of processed atmosphere. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn jacket and checked his credit balance one more time. 300 universal credits. Not much, but enough to buy the medical supplies his crew needed for their next long-haul journey to the Outer Rim. As captain of the cargo freighter New Horizon, he'd learned to stretch every credit until it screamed. The human moved through the crowd with practiced ease, dodging the chittering insectoid Vex merchants and the towering blue-skinned Tarathi diplomats. Most species here barely acknowledged humans. Earth was still considered a backwater planet by galactic standards. Its people viewed as primitive newcomers who'd only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Marcus didn't mind the dismissive looks. Humans had learned to keep their heads down and work hard. They took the jobs others wouldn't touch, flew the routes others considered too dangerous, and slowly built their reputation one honest deal at a time. He was examining a display of emergency medical kits when he heard it. A small, desperate voice speaking broken galactic standard. "Please, sir, just some milk for my sister. She is very sick." "I can work for you. Clean your ship. Anything." Marcus turned toward the sound and felt his heart clench. A small alien girl, no more than 10 years old by human standards, stood beside a food vendor's stall. Her species was unfamiliar to him. Pale lavender skin, large golden eyes, and delicate features that reminded him somehow of Earth's elves from old stories. Her clothes were little more than rags, and she was painfully thin. The food vendor, a gruff Coranian with scales covering his broad face, waved her away with one of his forearms. "No credits, no food. Move along, street rat." The girl's shoulders sagged, but she didn't give up. She approached the next stall, then the next, receiving the same cold rejection each time. Marcus watched her make her way down the row, her golden eyes growing dimmer with each refusal. When she reached the medical supply vendor Marcus had been dealing with, the Vex merchant's antenna twitched in annoyance. "Beggar, child. Away from my clean stall. You bring bad luck to honest business." The girl stumbled backward, nearly falling. That's when Marcus saw the small bundle she carried. Another child, even younger, wrapped in what looked like strips of salvaged fabric. The baby's breathing was labored, and even from a distance Marcus could see she was seriously ill. "Wait," Marcus called out, stepping forward. The alien girl turned toward him, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "You speak to me, human, sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus knelt down to her level, noting how she instinctively pulled her sick sister closer. "What's your name?"
"I am called Zara. This is my sister Neela. We
have no parents now. The plague ships came to our world 3 cycles ago. We escaped on a refugee transport, but..." She gestured helplessly at their surroundings. Marcus understood. Refugee children fell through the cracks on stations like this. No family, no credits, no legal status. They survived on scraps and kindness, and both were in short supply. "What kind of milk does your sister need?" he asked gently. Zara's eyes widened with surprise. Most beings didn't bother asking details. They just said no and walked away. The blue milk from Terran cows. The medical bot on our transport said it has special proteins that help with lung sickness. But it costs 50 credits for 1 bottle, and I have nothing to trade except..." She looked down at her thin arms. "Except work. 50 credits. Marcus winced internally. That was 1/6 of his medical supplies budget. His crew needed those supplies for their next run to the frontier worlds where real medical help was days away. But looking at the sick baby in Zara's arms, Marcus made his choice. He'd been in desperate situations before. He knew what it felt like to watch someone you loved suffer while the galaxy ignored your pain. "Come with me," he said, standing up. "Let's get your sister that milk." Zara stared at him in disbelief. But I cannot pay you now. I have no family, no ship, no home. How can I repay such kindness?" Marcus smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "You said you'd repay me when you're older, right? I'll hold you to that promise." They walked together toward the food vendor's stall, Zara's bare feet silent on the station's metal decking. Other beings moved aside, some watching the odd pair with curiosity, a human in a worn jacket and a refugee child carrying her dying sister. The Coranian vendor looked up as they approached, his four eyes focusing on Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone who sensed a potential sale. "1 bottle of your finest Terran cow milk," Marcus said, placing 50 credits on the counter. The vendor's expression shifted to surprise, then suspicion. "You know this child?" "I do now," Marcus replied simply. As the vendor retrieved the milk, Zara tugged at Marcus's jacket. When he looked down, tears were streaming down her lavender cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Humans are said to be selfish, to care only for their own kind. Why help us?" Marcus thought about that for a moment. How could he explain that humanity's struggle to find its place in the galaxy had taught them something valuable? That being underestimated and dismissed made you more likely to notice others who were suffering the same fate? "Because," he said finally, "everyone deserves a chance to grow up and keep their promises." The vendor handed over the bottle of milk, its blue contents swirling gently. Zara accepted it with trembling hands, immediately offering it to her sister. The baby's weak suckling sounds filled the air as she began to drink. "Thank you," Zara whispered, looking up at Marcus with those golden eyes now bright with hope. "I swear by the stars of my lost home, I will repay this debt. When I am older, stronger, I will find you and return what you have given us." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I believe you will." As he watched the alien girl feed her sister, Marcus couldn't know that this simple act of kindness would change the course of human history in the galaxy. He couldn't foresee that the debt he'd just created would grow into something far greater than 50 credits. All he knew was that he'd done the right thing. Sometimes, that was enough. 3 days later, Marcus Chen sat in the cramped captain's quarters of the New Horizon, reviewing navigation charts for their next cargo run. The ship hummed quietly around him, its aging systems working overtime to keep them functional. His crew of 5 humans was preparing for a 6-month haul to the frontier colonies. Dangerous work that paid well because most other species wouldn't risk it. A soft chime from his personal communicator interrupted his planning. The message icon showed an unknown sender, which was unusual. Most of his contacts were either crew members or business associates. The message was simple. "Captain Chen, Neela is better. Thank you, Zara." Marcus smiled, remembering the alien girl and her sick sister. He'd wondered what happened to them after they'd parted ways at the market. Refugee children often disappeared into the station's lower levels, surviving in the shadows where station security rarely bothered to look. He was about to close the message when another one arrived. This time it included a small image file, a picture of little Neela sitting up and smiling, her large golden eyes bright and healthy. Zara knelt beside her, both girls wearing simple but clean clothes. "Found work in the kitchens," the second message read. "Learning Galactic Standard better. Will keep my promise." Marcus leaned back in his chair, surprised by how much the update pleased him. In his 20 years of space travel, he'd helped people before. Stranded travelers, accident victims, fellow humans in trouble. But something about Zara's determination had stuck with him. He typed back a quick response. "Glad to hear Neela is well. Take care of yourselves. Captain Chen." Almost immediately another message appeared. "What is your ship's registry number?" "Want to remember it properly?" Marcus hesitated. Giving out ship information to strangers wasn't usually wise, but what harm could it do? The girl was just being thorough about her promise. "UES New Horizon Registry NH2847, he typed back. "Will remember," came the reply. "Thank you again for everything." Marcus closed the communicator and returned to his charts. Unaware that in the station's service levels below, a 10-year-old alien girl was carefully writing down every detail about the human ship and its captain in a small notebook she'd bought with her first earned credits. Zara sat on her small bunk in the workers' dormitory, her sister sleeping peacefully beside her. The other refugee workers, mostly adults who'd lost everything in various conflicts, had initially been skeptical of the young girl's claim that she'd find a way to repay a debt to a human stranger. They'd seen too many broken promises and shattered dreams, but Zara had something they'd lost: absolute faith in her own words. Every day she worked in the station's kitchens, scrubbing dishes and hauling supplies. Every evening, she studied Galactic Standard with fierce determination. And every night she researched everything she could about human ships and their operations. The other refugees began to notice her dedication. Merk, an old Koranian who'd lost his family in a mining accident, took to helping her with her studies. You really think you'll see this human again? He asked one evening as they practiced technical vocabulary. I know I will, Zara replied without hesitation. Captain Chen did something for us when no one else would. That creates a bond stronger than credits or contracts. Merk's scaled features creased into what might have been a smile. You sound like you're planning more than just paying back 50 credits. Zara looked up from her studies, her golden eyes reflecting a determination that seemed far too old for her young face. Credits can be lost or stolen. But knowledge, skills, loyalty, these things grow stronger with time. When I repay Captain Chen, it won't be with money. What then? With everything I am, she said simply. Everything I'll become. 6 months passed. Zara's galactic standard improved dramatically, and she began learning technical skills from the station's maintenance crews. The girl who'd once begged for milk was now a valued member of the service staff. Known for her quick learning and absolute reliability, she also began tracking human ship movements through the station's public databases. Every time a human vessel docked, she made note of it, studying their routes, their cargo manifests, their crew compositions. She was building a comprehensive understanding of how human operations worked in this sector of space. When the New Horizons registry appeared on the incoming traffic list, Zara's heart raced. She immediately requested time off from her kitchen duties and made her way to the docking bays. Marcus was supervising the unloading of their cargo when he noticed a familiar figure watching from the observation deck above. Even at a distance, he recognized the lavender skin and golden eyes. Captain, called out his first officer, Jake Morrison, you've got a visitor. Marcus looked up to see Zara waving at him, her face bright with excitement. She'd grown taller in the months since their first meeting, and the clean uniform of a station worker had replaced her ragged clothes. Be right back, Marcus told his crew, making his way up to the observation deck. Captain Chen, Zara called out as he approached. You remember me? Of course I remember you. How's Neela? Growing strong. She asks about the kind human who helped us. Zara's expression grew serious. I have been preparing for this day. I know I cannot repay your 50 credits yet, but I have something else to offer. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh? Zara pulled out a small data pad and handed it to him. Information. About the routes you've been running to the frontier colonies. I've studied the traffic patterns, analyzed the shipping manifests of other carriers. There are more efficient paths that could save you 15% on fuel costs. Marcus examined the data, his surprise growing with each line. The girl had done professional-level logistics analysis, identifying bottlenecks and opportunities that his own crew had missed. This is impressive work, Zara, but you don't owe me anything like this. Yes, I do, she said firmly. You showed kindness to strangers when no one else would. That kindness saved my sister's life. 50 credits is just the beginning of what I owe you. She gestured toward the busy docking bay below, where ships from dozens of species were loading and unloading cargo. I watch all the ships that come and go. I study how they work, where they trade, what routes they take. But human ships are different. They take risks others won't. They help people others ignore. They work harder for less profit. She looked directly at Marcus. This is why humans will succeed in the galaxy, even though others think you are weak. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This young girl had insights that veteran traders twice her age missed. Zara, what exactly are you planning? She smiled, and in that expression, Marcus caught a glimpse of the formidable adult she would become. To make sure that when aliens think of humans, they remember kindness first and strength second. To build something worthy of the debt I owe you. She paused, then added quietly, to grow up into someone who can repay you properly. As Marcus looked at the determined young alien holding advanced shipping analysis she'd created in her spare time, he began to understand that their chance meeting had set something in motion that was far bigger than either of them had imagined. 5 years had passed since Marcus first met Zara at the marketplace. The New Horizon continued its cargo runs, but Marcus noticed significant changes in how other species treated human vessels. Docking fees were more reasonable, customs inspections faster, and some alien traders even sought out human carriers specifically. Marcus couldn't pinpoint exactly when the shift had started, but he'd heard rumors about a mysterious information broker who specialized in human-alien trade relations. Someone who provided detailed analyses of shipping routes, market opportunities, and cultural protocols to anyone doing business with human enterprises. The broker's work was always accurate, always helpful, and mysteriously, always free. Marcus was reviewing a suspiciously generous shipping contract offer from a Tarathi consortium when his communicator chimed. The message was from an encrypted source, but he recognized the formal tone that had become familiar over the years. Captain Chen, new shipping opportunity requires discussion. Cargo Bay 7, Level 3, 1400 hours. Come alone. A friend who remembers milk. Marcus smiled despite his confusion. After all these years, Zara still signed her messages with references to their first meeting. But this was the first time she had asked for a face-to-face meeting since that day on the observation deck. At the appointed time, Marcus made his way to Cargo Bay 7. The space was mostly empty except for some storage containers and a single figure standing in the shadows. As he approached, he recognized Zara immediately, though she'd changed dramatically. Now 15 years old, she'd grown tall and graceful, with the bearing of someone used to command. Her simple worker's uniform had been replaced by a well-tailored business suit that managed to look both professional and distinctly alien. Her golden eyes held the same determination, but now they sparkled with confidence and intelligence that commanded respect. "Captain Chen," she said, stepping forward with a slight bow. "Thank you for coming." "Zara." Marcus couldn't hide his amazement. "Look at you. What happened to the kitchen worker I met 5 years ago?" She smiled. She learned that cleaning dishes and serving food teaches you how organizations really work. Everyone talks freely around service staff. They assume we don't understand the important conversations happening over our heads. You've been gathering intelligence. I've been learning about trade routes, political relationships, economic patterns, but most importantly about how different species perceive humans. Her expression grew serious. "The picture wasn't good, Captain. Most aliens saw humans as desperate, willing to take any job for any price. Useful, but not respectable." Marcus nodded grimly. "That sounds about right. We're still the new species on the block." "Were," Zara corrected. "Things are changing. Haven't you noticed that your shipping contracts have been more favorable lately? That customs officials treat your crew with more courtesy? Now that you mention it, yes. What does that have to do with you?" Zara gestured toward a nearby container which opened to reveal a sophisticated data analysis setup. Multiple screens showed shipping routes, trade statistics, and communication networks spanning the entire sector. "For the past 3 years, I've been operating as an information broker. Nothing illegal, just comprehensive analysis of market trends and cultural protocols. I specialize in human-alien business relationships." Marcus stared at the setup. "This is incredible. But why focus on human trade?" "Because," Zara said, settling into a chair at the main console, "I realized that 50 credits wasn't the real debt I owed you. You didn't just save Neela's life that day. You showed me what humans really are." She pulled up a holographic display showing trade statistics. Other species trade for profit, for territory, for resources. But humans trade for connection. You take jobs others won't because you understand that commerce is about building relationships, not just moving cargo. The display shifted to show communication patterns. When a Vex merchant cheats a Coranian trader, they both remember the slight for generations. But when a human captain goes out of their way to help a stranded alien crew, word spreads differently. It creates networks of trust. Marcus studied the data, beginning to understand the scope of what Zara had accomplished. "You've been manipulating these networks. Guiding them," she corrected gently. "I provide information that helps alien businesses understand human reliability. I translate cultural protocols so misunderstandings don't poison deals. I analyze shipping patterns to identify opportunities where human flexibility provides advantages." She stood and walked to another display showing financial projections. The result? Human shipping revenues in this sector have increased by 37% over 3 years. More importantly, humans are now seen as preferred partners rather than desperate alternatives. Marcus felt overwhelmed. "Zara, this is economic warfare at a galactic level. How did you learn to do this?" "By remembering what you taught me," she said simply. "You saw 2 alien children who needed help, and you didn't calculate whether helping us would benefit you. You just acted with kindness. That taught me that real power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down." She activated another screen showing current shipping manifests. "Which brings me to why I asked you here today. I've identified a major opportunity, but it requires human involvement at the highest levels. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite his bewilderment. The Galactic Trade Council is considering new regulations that would favor established shipping lines over independent operators. If passed, these regulations would effectively push humans out of long-haul cargo transport. That would be devastating, Marcus said. Most human crews work for independent operators. Exactly. But the regulations aren't final yet. They're based on assumptions about human capabilities that are 5 years out of date. Zara's eyes gleamed. I can provide data that proves human carriers have become more reliable and efficient than any other independent operators in the sector. But the data needs to be presented by someone the Council respects. And who would that be? Zara smiled. Captain Marcus Chen of the UES New Horizon, the human captain who's become legendary for his crew's reliability and integrity, the one whose reputation opened doors for other human traders. Marcus blinked in surprise. Legendary? I'm just a cargo hauler. You're the human who helped 2 alien refugees without expecting anything in return. That story has spread, Captain. It's become part of how other species understand what humans represent. She pulled up a final display showing communication threads across dozens of species networks. Every positive interaction your crew has had, every favor you've done, every time you've gone beyond your contract obligations, it's all contributed to a growing perception that humans can be trusted. Marcus stared at the web of connections spreading across the galaxy, all somehow linked back to his ship, his crew, his decisions. You're saying that helping you and Neela that day started all this? I'm saying that helping us revealed what you were already becoming, Zara replied. My job has been to make sure the galaxy noticed. She handed him a data crystal. This contains everything the Trade Council needs to see about human shipping capabilities. Will you present it? Marcus took the crystal, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to hold such enormous implications. What happens after this, Zara? Have you repaid your debt? She shook her head. Captain, I've barely begun to repay what I owe you. You saved my sister's life with 50 credits. But what you really gave me was proof that kindness exists in the universe. That's a debt that can never be fully repaid. Her expression softened. But I can spend my life making sure that the kindness you showed spreads as far as possible. Marcus looked at the young alien, woman who'd grown from a desperate refugee child into something he was only beginning to understand, a force that was quietly reshaping galactic politics through the simple principle of helping others succeed. What do I call you now? He asked. You're obviously not just Zara the information broker. She smiled. I'm still Zara. Still the girl who promised to repay you when she got older. I've just discovered that getting older means understanding how big that promise really was. The Galactic Trade Council chambers hummed with quiet conversations as representatives from dozens of species took their seats. Marcus adjusted his formal dress uniform, still uncomfortable with the attention his presentation had drawn. What was supposed to be a routine regulatory hearing had become a major political event. In the observer gallery, Zara sat beside her now 18-year-old sister Neela, both wearing the formal robes of registered trade advocates. The transformation was remarkable. Neela had grown into a brilliant young woman specializing in interspecies law, while Zara had become the most sought-after economic analyst in the sector. Nervous? Neela whispered in their native language. Excited, Zara replied. Today we find out if 5 years of preparation was enough. On the main floor, Council Chairman Vorthak called the session to order. The massive Tarathi's blue skin rippled with formal patterns as he spoke. Today we consider proposed shipping regulations that would significantly impact independent cargo operations throughout the sector. Marcus stood as his name was called, walking to the central podium with steady steps. Around him, alien faces watched with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Humans rarely spoke before the full council. Honored representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I come before you not as a politician or economist, but as a simple cargo captain who has spent 25 years moving goods between worlds. He activated the holographic display, showing shipping statistics that Zara had meticulously compiled. These proposed regulations are based on the assumption that independent operators pose higher risks than corporate fleets. The data I present today tells a different story. The first chart showed reliability statistics. Over the past 5 years, Human-operated independent vessels have achieved a 97% on-time delivery rate, higher than any corporate fleet in the sector. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several representatives leaned forward with interest. Furthermore, Marcus continued, independent operators have logged fewer insurance claims, fewer customs violations, and higher customer satisfaction ratings than their corporate counterparts. Counselor Vex Prime Zach's antenna twitched with agitation. These statistics are impressive, Captain Chen, but they represent a small sample size. Human operations are still relatively limited in scope. That's true, Marcus acknowledged, but scale isn't everything. Independent operators succeed because we understand that reputation is our most valuable cargo. When your entire business depends on the trust of your customers, you can't afford to cut corners. He shifted the display to show trade route maps. Independent operators also serve routes that corporate fleets avoid. We carry supplies to frontier colonies, disaster relief to devastated worlds, and critical components to remote industrial sites. If these regulations pass, many of these communities will lose their only reliable supply line. In the gallery, Zara watched as several representatives began taking notes. The Koranian delegation was particularly engaged, which wasn't surprising given how many of their remote mining operations depended on independent human carriers. Counselor Tarathi Prime Keloth stood. Captain Chen, while your statistics are compelling, we must consider the broader implications. Corporate fleets have standardized safety protocols, predictable scheduling, and established financial backing. How can independent operators provide equivalent assurances? This was the moment Zara had prepared Marcus for. He smiled slightly before responding. Counselor Keloth, may I share a personal story that illustrates the difference? The Tarathi nodded, curiosity replacing skepticism in his expression. 8 years ago, I encountered 2 refugee children on this very station. One was dying of lung sickness. They had no credits, no family, no legal status. By every economic calculation, helping them was a poor investment. Marcus paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. But humans don't always calculate the economics of kindness. I bought medicine for the sick child because it was the right thing to do. That decision changed my life in ways I never expected. He gestured toward the gallery where Zara and Neela sat. Those children grew up to become 2 of the most respected trade advocates in the sector. Their work has facilitated billions of credits in successful commerce, created employment for thousands of beings, and built bridges between species that had never cooperated before. The chamber was now completely silent, every representative listening intently. The older child. Zara compiled every statistic I've presented today. She did it not for profit, but because she remembered an act of kindness from a human stranger. This is what independent operators bring to galactic commerce. The understanding that business is ultimately about relationships between beings, not just transactions between entities. Marcus activated a final display, showing communication networks spanning the galaxy. These are the trust networks that independent operators have built over the past decade. Every successful delivery, every act of integrity, every moment when we chose to help rather than exploit, they all contribute to a web of reliability that no corporate structure can replicate. He looked directly at Chairman Vorthak. Corporate fleets have contracts and regulations to ensure compliance. Independent operators have something more powerful: reputation. When your business depends on being trusted by dozens of different species, each with their own customs and expectations, you learn to be worthy of that trust. Counselor Vex Prime Zach's antenna drooped slightly. You speak of trust and kindness, Captain Chen, but commerce requires predictability. How can we be certain that independent operators will continue to maintain these standards? Marcus smiled. Because failing to maintain them means losing everything we've worked to build. A corporate fleet can absorb losses and continue operating. An independent operator who breaks trust doesn't get second chances. He paused, then added quietly, besides, you're not regulating humans or any single species. You're regulating a principle, the idea that small operators who stake their reputation on every job they take can compete with large organizations that spread risk across thousands of vessels. The data shows that this principle works. Independent operators provide superior service to underserved routes, maintain higher reliability standards, and build stronger relationships with diverse client bases. The question isn't whether we can trust independent operators, it's whether you're willing to preserve a system that has consistently delivered results. As Marcus returned to his seat, Zara felt tears forming in her golden eyes. The human who had shown kindness to a desperate alien child had just made the case for economic policies that would affect millions of beings across the galaxy. Chairman Vorthak called for a recess before the vote. As representatives filed out to discuss their positions, Zara made her way down to the main floor. "Captain," she said quietly as she approached Marcus, "whatever happens today, you should know that your words will echo across the galaxy. There are representatives here from 50 worlds, and they'll carry this message home with them." Marcus looked at the young woman who had grown from a desperate refugee into a force that was reshaping galactic politics through the simple principle of remembering kindness. "Zara, win or lose, I want you to know something. That day I bought milk for Neela, I thought I was making a small gesture that would be forgotten by tomorrow. Instead, it became the most important thing I've ever done." "Not because of the milk," Zara replied. "Because you showed me that there are beings in the universe who will help strangers without calculating the benefit. That lesson has shaped everything I've done since." She gestured toward the chamber where representatives were beginning to return to their seats. "Today we find out if kindness can change policy. But regardless of the vote, you've already changed the galaxy." As the session resumed and Chairman Vorthak called for the final vote on the shipping regulations, Marcus realized that the debt Zara had insisted she owed him had become something much larger, a principle that was now being tested at the highest levels of galactic government. The question was no longer whether kindness could be repaid, but whether it could be institutionalized. 10 years after the Galactic Trade Council vote, the consequences of that decision continued to ripple across known space. The independent operator protections that Marcus had advocated for had fundamentally changed how galactic commerce operated. Small carriers now competed on equal footing with corporate fleets, leading to innovation and efficiency improvements that benefited everyone. But the most profound changes were happening on Kepler Station, a newly constructed trade hub in the frontier sectors. The station's unique governance structure had become a model studied by political scientists across the galaxy. Marcus Chen, now bearing the title of Senior Trade Representative for the Human Independent Operators Guild, stood in the station's central command center alongside an impressive array of alien officials. At 35, Zara had become the station's Director of Interspecies Relations, while her sister Neela served as Chief Legal Counsel. "The hegemony delegation is requesting exclusive docking privileges for their military escorts," reported Commander Thex, a pragmatic Koranian who managed station security. "They claim standard protocols don't provide adequate protection for their diplomatic cargo." Zara studied the holographic display showing ship movements around the station. The Zelanian hegemony was one of the galaxy's most powerful military alliances, known for their aggressive expansion policies and contempt for smaller species. "What's the nature of their diplomatic cargo?" she asked. "Classified," Thex replied. "But intelligence suggests they're transporting weapons technology to their client states in the Outer Rim." Marcus frowned. "If we grant special privileges to the hegemony, other military powers will demand the same treatment. That could turn Kepler Station into an armed camp." "Worse," added Neela, reviewing legal precedents on her tablet. "Exclusive privileges violate our founding charter. Kepler Station was established as neutral territory, where all species enjoy equal access and protection." Zara walked to the main observation window, looking out at the diverse collection of ships docked at the station's arms. Human cargo haulers worked alongside Vex merchant vessels, Tarathi diplomatic cruisers, and independent traders from dozens of minor species. "Commander Thex, what's your security assessment of denying the hegemony's request?" "They'll be angry," the Koranian said bluntly. "The hegemony doesn't take no for an answer gracefully. They might impose economic sanctions or restrict access to their territory. And if we grant their request, we set a precedent that military might trump station law. Every other power will test our resolve, and within a year we'll be managing a dozen different sets of special privileges. The station's neutrality would be destroyed." Marcus had seen this pattern before on other frontier stations. Once powerful factions gained special status, smaller operators and independent traders found themselves squeezed out. The economic diversity that made Kepler Station successful would gradually disappear. "There's another factor to consider," Zara said, turning back to the group. The hegemony's cargo might be classified, but their destination isn't. They're heading to the Epsilon colonies, where there's been growing unrest over resource extraction rights. Neela looked up from her legal research. You think they're delivering weapons to suppress the colonial independence movement? It fits their pattern, Zara confirmed. The hegemony has been backing the extractive corporations against colonial governors who want more local control. Marcus felt a familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Kepler Station's decisions affected more than just trade flows. They influenced political developments across the frontier. What would happen if we delayed their request? He asked. Claimed we need time to review security protocols? They'd see through that immediately, Thex replied. The hegemony delegation includes intelligence officers who know exactly how our systems work. Zara moved to another display, pulling up communication logs from recent diplomatic traffic. Actually, there might be another approach. According to these intercepts, the Zilanian hegemony isn't the only power interested in the Epsilon situation. The Coranian Mining Consortium and the Vex Commercial Alliance are both concerned about stability in the colonies. Competing interests, Neela observed. Classic frontier politics, exactly. And that gives us leverage. Zara highlighted several message threads on the display. What if we offered to mediate a discussion between all interested parties? Frame it as a station-sponsored security conference. Marcus began to see where she was going. Turn their exclusive access request into a multilateral negotiation. The hegemony can't complain about special treatment if we're offering the same platform to their competitors, Zara continued. And if all the major powers are represented, none of them can claim the others have unfair advantages. Thex's scaled features creased into what might have been a smile. Clever. But will the hegemony accept a multilateral approach? They prefer to negotiate from positions of strength. They will if the alternative is being denied access entirely, Neela said. Station neutrality gives us the legal authority to refuse service to anyone who threatens our operational integrity. Marcus studied the proposal, recognizing the sophisticated political maneuvering that Zara had learned to excel at. But he also saw something else, the same principle that had guided their first interaction years ago. You're not just protecting the station's neutrality, he realized. You're creating an opportunity for smaller voices to be heard in a negotiation that would otherwise be dominated by military powers. Zara nodded. The Epsilon colonies have legitimate concerns about their autonomy. The extractive corporations have valid business interests. The hegemony has security considerations. Instead of letting these conflicts escalate into violence, we can provide a forum where all parties can negotiate, honestly. And Kepler Station benefits by remaining truly neutral while demonstrating our value as a diplomatic hub, Neela added. Marcus looked around the command center, marveling at how much had changed since that day he'd bought milk for a sick alien child. The 3 humans and 1, Coranian planning this diplomatic intervention, represented a level of interspecies cooperation that would have been unthinkable when he'd first started hauling cargo. There's one more consideration, he said. If we successfully mediate this dispute, it establishes Kepler Station as more than just a trade hub. We become a recognized neutral ground for resolving frontier conflicts, which attracts more business and enhances our strategic importance. Zara agreed. But it also makes us a target for any faction that prefers to settle disputes through force rather than negotiation. Commander Thex activated a tactical display. I can handle increased security requirements, but only if we have advance warning of potential threats. Diplomatic immunity only goes so far when military powers decide they don't like our decisions. Zara walked back to the observation window, watching a small human cargo ship dock alongside a massive hegemony cruiser. The size difference was dramatic, but both vessels received the same courteous treatment from station traffic control. Commander, remember what Captain Chen taught us about independent operators. Sometimes being small and apparently vulnerable is actually an advantage. Big powers expect other big powers to challenge them directly. They're not prepared to deal with someone who simply insists on following consistent principles regardless of threats. She turned back to the group. The hegemony is used to intimidating opponents into submission, or forcing them into military confrontations they can win. They're not equipped to handle a station that says, these are our rules, they apply to everyone equally, and if you don't like them, you're free to take your business elsewhere. Marcus smiled. recognizing his own philosophy reflected in Zara's strategy. You're betting that their need for a neutral frontier base outweighs their desire to throw their weight around. I'm betting that consistent principles, backed by superior service, will always triumph over arbitrary power in the long run, Zara replied. It's a lesson I learned from a human captain who showed kindness to strangers when he had every reason to walk away. Nyla finished reviewing the legal frameworks involved. I can draft the mediation proposal within an hour. If we present it as a standard conflict resolution service offered to all station users, the hegemony can accept without losing face. Do it, Marcus decided, and Commander Thex begin discreet preparations for enhanced security. If this works, we're going to be hosting some very tense negotiations. As the team dispersed to implement their plan, Zara remained at the observation window. Marcus joined her, both watching the constant flow of ships representing dozens of species and political factions. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd walked past you and Neela that day? Marcus asked. Zara considered the question seriously. Neela would have died. I would have become bitter and angry, and the galaxy would have lost an opportunity to prove that kindness is stronger than force. She paused, then added quietly, "But you didn't walk past. You stopped to help strangers who had nothing to offer in return. That choice changed everything that came after." Marcus watched a small independent trader successfully negotiate passage between two massive military vessels, the station's traffic control ensuring equal treatment for all. I'm starting to think that debt you've been trying to repay doesn't work the way you think it does, Zara. What do you mean? I mean, maybe the point isn't to repay kindness, but to pass it forward. To create a galaxy where helping strangers becomes normal instead of exceptional. Zara smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the light from the hundreds of ships moving peacefully through Kepler Station's controlled space. Then I suppose my debt just keeps growing, doesn't it? The mediation conference had been running for 3 days, and tensions in Kepler Station's diplomatic section were reaching dangerous levels. Representatives from 7 major galactic powers sat around an elegant circular table, each delegation maintaining the careful politeness that barely concealed their fundamental disagreements. Zara observed from the mediator's position, her 40-year-old features composed despite the complexity of the negotiations. The Epsilon colony crisis had attracted far more attention than anyone had anticipated. What began as a dispute over mining rights had evolved into a test case for how frontier territories would be governed in the new galactic order. The hegemony position remains unchanged, declared Admiral Vexkorth, his massive frame radiating military authority. Colonial territories lack the institutional stability to manage strategic resources independently. External oversight is essential for galactic security. Governor Martinez of the Epsilon colonies leaned forward, her weathered face showing the strain of representing worlds that could be devastated by the wrong decision. Admiral, with respect, our colonies have been self-governing for 12 years. We've maintained peace, developed sustainable extraction practices, and built trading relationships with dozens of species. This oversight you're proposing looks suspiciously like occupation. Marcus sat with the human delegation, officially representing independent operators but actually serving as an unofficial advisor to Zara. He'd watched similar negotiations before, and the pattern was always the same. Big powers talked past each other while smaller voices got ignored. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Thrain of the Tarathi Diplomatic Corps, we could examine successful precedents from other frontier regions. The Vega Accords established a framework for graduated autonomy that has functioned well for 30 years. The Vega Accords apply to established colonies with proven administrative capacity, countered Director Zix of the Vex Commercial Alliance. The Epsilon territories are resource extraction zones with temporary populations. Different governance models are required. Zara had been listening to variations of this argument for 3 days. Each faction had legitimate concerns, but they were all talking past each other. The military powers focused on security and control. The commercial interests prioritized predictable business environments. The colonists wanted autonomy and self-determination. If I may interrupt, Zara said calmly, activating a holographic display, I'd like to shift our focus from precedents to outcomes. What specific results are we all trying to achieve? The Admiral's expression suggested he found the question irrelevant. The result we seek is obvious: galactic stability through proper resource management. Governor Martinez, what outcomes are important to your colonies? Economic sustainability, political autonomy, and protection from exploitation, the governor replied immediately. Director Zix? Reliable supply chains, enforceable contracts, and protection of commercial investments. Zara nodded, highlighting each response on the display. Counselor Thrain? Long-term peace, respect for established legal frameworks, and minimal disruption to existing trade relationships. As each delegation stated their priorities, Zara built a comprehensive matrix showing overlapping interests and potential conflicts. The visual representation revealed something that the verbal arguments had obscured. Most of the desired outcomes weren't mutually exclusive. Interesting, she observed. Everyone wants stability, economic sustainability, and protection from exploitation. The disagreement isn't about goals, but about methods. Admiral Vex Korth's antenna twitched impatiently. Methods matter, mediator. Good intentions don't guarantee successful implementation. Absolutely correct, Admiral. Which is why I'd like to propose an experimental approach based on measurable performance standards, rather than predetermined governance structures. Zara activated a new section of the display, showing detailed proposals that she and Neela had developed over the past 3 days. What if we established a 5-year trial period where the Epsilon colonies maintain self-governance while meeting specific benchmarks for security, environmental protection, and commercial reliability? Independent monitors from multiple species would verify compliance, and all parties would have clearly defined intervention rights if standards aren't met. Governor Martinez studied the proposal carefully. What kind of benchmarks? Security, maintaining internal order and preventing hostile activities that threaten neighboring systems. Environmental, adhering to galactic standards for sustainable resource extraction. Commercial, honoring contracts and maintaining transparent legal frameworks for business disputes. Director Zix leaned back in his chair. And if they fail to meet these benchmarks? Then the concerned parties have documented justification for intervention, Zara replied. But intervention would be guided by the specific nature of the failure, not general assumptions about colonial incompetence. Marcus recognized the elegant complexity of Zara's proposal. She was offering each faction what they claimed to want, while creating accountability mechanisms that protected everyone's interests. Counselor Thrain spoke first. This approach has merit, but it requires trust that all parties will respect the monitoring process. What happens if one faction decides the monitors are biased? Multiple oversight mechanisms, Neela interjected from her position as legal counsel. Commercial disputes go to established arbitration courts. Security issues are monitored by neutral peacekeeping forces. Environmental compliance is verified by the Galactic Environmental Authority. And if someone objects to these neutral authorities? Admiral Vex Korth asked skeptically. Zara smiled slightly. Then they're objecting to institutions that they themselves helped establish and fund. It becomes very difficult to claim bias against systems you've officially endorsed. The room fell silent as each delegation considered the implications. Marcus watched the faces around the table, recognizing the moment when positions began to shift from automatic opposition to cautious consideration. There's another element, Zara continued. Success in the Epsilon colonies would create a template for frontier governance that could be applied elsewhere. This isn't just about one dispute. It's about establishing principles for how the galaxy handles similar situations in the future. Director Zix activated his own datapad, running calculations. The commercial benefits of a successful framework could be substantial. Predictable governance. Models reduce investment risks across all frontier territories, and successful colonial self-governance demonstrates that smaller political entities can maintain stability without military oversight. Governor Martinez added, that has implications for dozens of emerging worlds. Admiral Vex Korth remained skeptical. You're asking military powers to accept restrictions on their intervention authority based on untested monitoring systems. I'm asking military powers to accept evidence-based intervention criteria instead of subjective threat assessments, Zara corrected. You retain all your authority, but you have to justify its use according to standards that everyone has agreed to in advance. Marcus saw the breakthrough moment approaching. Zara had managed to reframe the entire negotiation from a zero-sum power struggle into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. What happens after the 5-year trial period? Counselor Thrain asked. If the benchmarks are met consistently, the colonies gain full autonomous status with permanent protection against arbitrary intervention, Neela explained. If they're not met, concerned parties have documented justification for whatever remedial actions they deem necessary. And if the results are mixed, then we extend the trial period and adjust the benchmarks based on actual experience, rather than theoretical assumptions. Zara replied. Admiral Vexkorth studied the proposal for several minutes before speaking. This framework would apply to all frontier territories facing similar situations? If all parties agree to make it a general precedent, yes. Then we're not just negotiating the fate of the Epsilon colonies. We're potentially reshaping how galactic expansion is governed. Zara nodded. Exactly. The question is whether we want that reshaping to be based on arbitrary power or transparent principles. Marcus felt a familiar sense of awe at how far the desperate refugee child had evolved. She was now facilitating negotiations that would affect billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Governor Martinez looked around the table, gauging the mood of the other delegations. I think I speak for the colonies when I say we're willing to accept this framework, assuming the benchmarks are reasonable and the monitoring is genuinely neutral. Director Zix nodded slowly. The Vex Commercial Alliance can support this approach. The Torathi Diplomatic Corps finds the proposal acceptable, Counselor Thrain agreed. The overwhelming support sent a wave of celebration through the gallery, but Zara raised her hand for quiet. Honored representatives, this vote marks not an ending but a beginning. We have established principles, but principles only matter if they guide our actions in the difficult situations we will inevitably face. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from across the political spectrum. The true test of this charter will come the first time a major power finds it inconvenient. The first time economic interests conflict with humanitarian principles. The first time we must choose between what is easy and what is right. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades proving that idealism could be practical. When those moments come, remember why we are here. Remember that every being in this galaxy started as someone's child, deserving of dignity and hope. Remember that civilizations are judged not by their power to dominate, but by their willingness to lift others up. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out to celebrate, Marcus made his way to Zara's side. Around them, beings from dozens of species were embracing, shaking hands, and making plans to implement the new frameworks. Well, Marcus said quietly, I think you can finally consider that debt paid in full. Zara shook her head, still smiling from the successful vote. Marcus, the debt I owe you can never be paid in full because it keeps growing. Every time we prove that kindness is stronger than force, every time we choose cooperation over domination, every time we insist that every being deserves dignity, the debt gets larger. She gestured toward the celebrating crowd. Look around this room. These aren't just political representatives voting on abstract principles. These are beings who have chosen to believe that the galaxy can be better than it has been. That belief started with a human captain who bought milk for a sick alien child without calculating the cost. Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing delegates making plans for cooperative ventures, establishing cultural exchange programs, and designing economic frameworks that prioritize sustainability over exploitation. So what happens now, he asked. Zara's expression grew thoughtful. Now we find out if the galaxy we've imagined can survive contact with reality. Laws and charters are just words until people choose to live by them, especially when living by them is difficult. She paused, then smiled with the same determination Marcus remembered from their first meeting. But I've spent 25 years learning that kindness is more powerful than fear, that cooperation produces better results than domination, and that even the smallest act of compassion can change the course of history. She looked directly at Marcus. You taught me that when you helped two strangers without expecting anything in return. Now we get to find out if an entire galaxy can learn the same lesson. As they walked together toward the reception celebrating the charter's passage, Marcus realized that the debt Zara had insisted she owed him had indeed grown beyond all possibility of repayment. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the most valuable debts were the ones that could never be fully paid. only passed forward to create an endless chain of kindness spanning the stars. In the end, 50 credits worth of milk had purchased something far more valuable than medicine for a sick child. It had bought proof that compassion could reshape the destiny of civilizations, and the payment plan would last forever. All eyes turned to Admiral Vexkorth. The hegemony's decision would determine whether the framework succeeded or failed. The Admiral studied Zara's face for a long moment. Mediator, you've managed to create a structure where everyone gets what they claim to want while preventing anyone from getting what they secretly hoped for. That's either brilliant diplomacy or a cleverly disguised trap. It's a chance to prove that principled governance works better than arbitrary power, Zara replied simply. The same principle that built Kepler Station into the most successful frontier hub in the galaxy. Admiral Vexkorth looked around the table one final time, then nodded slowly. The Zilanian hegemony accepts the proposed framework, subject to detailed negotiation of the specific benchmarks and monitoring procedures. The room erupted in quiet celebration as delegations began discussing implementation details. Marcus made his way to Zara's side as the formal session concluded. Another debt successfully managed, he said quietly. Zara shook her head. This wasn't about repaying what I owe you, Marcus. This was about proving that the principles you taught me can work on any scale, from helping individual refugees to reshaping galactic governance. And what did I teach you exactly? That kindness isn't weakness, that helping others doesn't diminish you, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply insist that everyone deserves to be treated fairly. Marcus looked around the diplomatic chamber where 7 major galactic powers had just agreed to be bound by principles of transparency and accountability rather than raw force. Zara, I'm starting to think that maybe I'm the one in debt now. She smiled. Then I suppose we'll just have to keep helping each other repay it. 25 years had passed since Marcus Chen first encountered a desperate alien child begging for milk in a space station marketplace. Now, standing in the Grand Assembly Hall of the newly established Galactic Humanitarian Council, he barely recognized the galaxy that simple act of kindness had helped create. The council chambers buzzed with representatives from over 200 species, all gathered to formalize the first universal charter for frontier rights. The Epsilon protocols, as they had come to be known, had been successfully implemented across dozens of worlds, creating a template for peaceful expansion that prioritized cooperation over conquest. Zara, now 55 and bearing the title of Director General of Interspecies Relations, stood at the central podium addressing the assembled delegates. Her golden eyes still held the determination Marcus remembered from their first meeting. But now they reflected the wisdom of someone who had spent decades building bridges between vastly different civilizations. Honored representatives, Zara's voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. Today we vote not just on a charter, but on the principle that compassion and justice are not luxuries for peaceful times, but necessities for any civilization that wishes to grow beyond its own limitations. Marcus sat in the human delegation section, officially retired from active cargo operations but serving as an elder advisor to the Independent Operators Guild. Beside him, Neela had grown into a distinguished legal scholar whose work on interspecies law had become the foundation for much of the galaxy's new cooperative frameworks. The charter before you, Zara continued, establishes 3 fundamental principles. First, that no species or alliance may claim exclusive authority over another species' development. Second, that all beings have the right to self-determination within frameworks that respect the rights of others. Third, that intervention in another society's affairs requires transparent justification and multilateral approval. In the gallery above, hundreds of beings from dozens of species watched the proceedings. Many were refugees, colonists, and independent traders whose lives had been directly affected by the policies being formalized today. Their presence reminded everyone that these weren't abstract political principles, but rules that would determine the fate of billions of individuals. Admiral Vexkorth, now retired but still influential within the Zilanian hegemony, raised one of his massive hands. Director General, while these principles are admirable in theory, how do we address situations where rapid intervention is necessary to prevent catastrophic loss of life? It was a question that had been debated for months in preparatory committees. The balance between respecting sovereignty and preventing humanitarian disasters remained one of the most challenging aspects of interstellar governance. Admiral, the Charter includes provisions for emergency humanitarian intervention, Zara replied, activating a holographic display showing the relevant legal frameworks. However, such interventions must be limited in scope to addressing the immediate crisis, must include multiple species in the response force, and must be followed by transparent reconstruction assistance rather than permanent occupation. Governor Martinez, now representing the Epsilon Colonial Alliance, stood to add her perspective. The key difference is accountability. Under the old system, military powers could claim humanitarian concerns to justify any action they wanted to take. Under this charter, they have to prove their interventions actually serve humanitarian purposes rather than strategic interests. Director Zix of the Vex Commercial Alliance activated his own display. The economic benefits of this approach have been substantial. Transparent, predictable governance frameworks have increased frontier investment by 400% while reducing conflict-related losses by 70%. Marcus listened to the debate with a mixture of pride and amazement. The concepts being discussed with such sophistication had grown from a simple observation that treating others with kindness and respect produced better outcomes than exploitation and dominance. Counselor Thrain of the Tarathi Diplomatic Corps raised a different concern. While the economic and humanitarian benefits are clear, we must also consider the precedent this charter establishes. By limiting the authority of established powers, are we not potentially empowering smaller factions to challenge legitimate governance? Counselor, Zara responded, the charter doesn't empower anyone to challenge legitimate governance. It simply requires that all governance be demonstrably legitimate, according to transparent standards rather than arbitrary force. She paused, then added with a slight smile, after all, if a government's authority is truly legitimate, it should be able to justify its actions according to the principles its own representatives helped establish. The gentle humor drew appreciative murmurs from the audience, but Marcus recognized the steel beneath Zara's diplomatic courtesy. She had learned to make opposition to the charter sound like opposition to justice itself. Representative Klex of the Koranian Mining Consortium stood next. The practical question remains, how do we enforce these principles against powers that choose to ignore them? The same way we enforce any other interstellar law, Nyla interjected from her position as chief legal counsel. Through economic consequences, diplomatic isolation, and if necessary, multilateral enforcement action. The difference is that enforcement actions themselves must meet the Charter's standards for transparency and proportionality. In other words, added Governor Martinez, aggressors can't hide behind claims of self-defense or humanitarian concern when their real motives are conquest or exploitation. Admiral Vex Korth studied the Charter documents on his datapad. This system assumes that multilateral coalitions will be more just than unilateral actions. History suggests that assumption may be overly optimistic. Zara nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right, Admiral. Multilateral coalitions can be just as capable of injustice as individual powers. That's why the Charter includes mechanisms for appeal, review, and modification based on actual outcomes rather than good intentions. She gestured toward the diverse assembly around them. But there's another factor to consider. This Charter doesn't just limit the authority of major powers. It empowers smaller voices to demand accountability. When enforcement actions require justification to hundreds of species rather than just a few allied governments, it becomes much harder to disguise selfish motives as noble purposes. Marcus reflected on how perfectly this captured the lesson he'd learned from watching Zara grow from a desperate child into a galactic statesman. Power exercised in isolation tended toward selfishness and abuse. Power exercised under observation and accountability tended toward justice and cooperation. The debate continued for several more hours, with representatives raising detailed questions about implementation, enforcement, and appeals processes. Throughout it all, Zara maintained the patient, respectful tone that had become her trademark, treating every concern as legitimate while consistently steering the discussion back to core principles. Finally, Chairman Vorthak called for the formal vote. The chamber fell silent as representatives activated their voting devices, the results displayed in real time on massive screens visible throughout the hall. 207 species voted in favor of the Universal Charter for Frontier Rights. 12 abstained, 3 voted against.